Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys. You are now entering Season 2 of the Swan Hockey Podcast. Swan Hockey is flying around the junior hockey world one episode at a time. You'll experience things dreams are made of, as well as things of terrible nightmares. Strap in, hold on, and enjoy the ride. And now, Swan Hockey.
Did you see I read online the other day that NCAA Division III is now, they're going to let the major junior guys play. I guess they're going to do a vote or whatnot, but I guess it's just a formality at this point from what I read. And then the ACHA has already announced that the major junior guys could play ACHA now. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it, but I'm not completely surprised that they do that, since really, in the end, NCAA is NCAA, and they say it's all right, so I'm not totally shocked that Division III would eventually follow suit. And I mean, after all, somebody could always bring a lawsuit up about it. And then, of course, ACHA is a completely different organization. They never really had to follow the same rules anyway. So, it's not something totally shocking.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that the ACHA followed, like back in the day, I'm kind of surprised that they followed suit and wouldn't let the major junior guys play, because I kind of feel like they missed the boat on that. I feel like they could have been the first ones to, like, if they just would have always let the major junior guys play, who knows? They may have gotten some guys. I mean, I think, obviously, I don't think this is going to, and you and I have talked about it a number of times, but, I don't think that this is going to have a major impact on Division III and ACHA. I mean, there's probably not going to be the amount of guys going from major junior to Division III is, or ACHA is probably going to be minimal. It's probably more important for the guys that maybe played a few games major junior and got cut, or played a year and got cut, that now they have that, maybe they're not Division I candidates, and now they have that other avenue.
Well, I'd be, quite frankly, that's the only guys they're going to get. I'm generally more the first type, the guy that played one or two games but didn't make it. Because major junior players, people have to understand their psychology. You play major junior because you want to play pro hockey. That's your dream. That's your plan, that you're going to play pro hockey. Now, if you're a major junior player, generally NCAA will be sort of two things. It'll be an extended chance to develop for pro hockey. I didn't quite get what I wanted here in my years in junior, but I still am a pretty good player. I might still have a shot at playing pro and going as a free agent later on. And for other guys, they'll get the education and still play high-end hockey. But do I see a guy in a major junior locker room saying, I'm going to play ACHA or D3? No, that's not going to happen. A guy that was cut, that played 3 games, he's a Tier 2 junior player. He's just really, in the end, he's just a good Tier 2 player, and he's a guy that, in the past had burnt his eligibility. Well, not anymore. You could see guys like that. But do I see it being a huge impact? In all honesty, it's sort of the same level player that a lot of Division III teams are already getting. I don't think it's going to be a tremendous difference. And, like I say, a regular major junior player can't see it happening.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the way that everything, this is going to be the first year now, I guess, where the dust is settled and we have this new structure and these new rules, and there's kind of one agreed path. And I say that very lightly, everybody's path is different, but there's one kind of agreed backbone of a structure now of the hierarchy of the different levels. And, so now the dust is kind of settling. This is going to be the first year. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And one thing that I'm interested in, I asked Lenny Cannell this, the scout for the Philadelphia Flyers back in season 1. I asked him this, if he thinks that it's going to possibly change the way NHL teams draft, right? If you were on the fence about an OHL player for that 6th round pick or that 7th round pick, and it's okay, we're deciding between this OHL player and maybe a USHL player. We like the OHL player better, but he's kind of at the end of his development path. He's not eligible to go to college, where the USHL guy, he is eligible to go to college, so we know he's going to get 4 more years of development. Maybe we draft a guy that has that longer road ahead of him, that has that option for 4 more years of development. Now that the OHL guys have that same luxury, do you think maybe we'll see a difference in the way NHL teams are drafting? Maybe they're taking more flyers out of major junior that normally they wouldn't have, because, again, 6th, 7th round, those guys are going to need the development time?
Well, having worked in the NHL a long time ago, granted, but I still worked in the NHL and having dealt with it a long time, it certainly can play a role in you get to a certain round of the draft. Of course, there are two things we have to consider. Our number one, is that player who's in the USHL doing that now going to maybe be in the OHL in the future, as opposed to going USHL to preserve his eligibility? Will he maybe say, okay, I'll go OHL, preserve my eligibility and play, as opposed to the past? And then, of course, the other question is we have to see the CBA change next year, because obviously it's going to become more uniform about your draft rights, how long you hold a guy. Now that is going to become uniform. But right now it's not uniform officially. Now that'll change. So I think it will impact things most definitely, if it comes down to that type of player. But there's that other question of, would that guy be in the USHL now, or would he be in the OHL? Would he have opted for that route originally and be that long-term development guy in the OHL as opposed to being long-term development guy in the USHL? And that's a good question. We don't know really. And the thing about it settling, the dust really hasn't settled yet. It's going to take time because everybody's it's a new reality, but everybody has to get used to that reality. And how exactly they're going to perceive of that reality is something I think that it's going to take a little time for guys to figure out. It's not like a switch just flipped on and guys have an absolute hold and there's absolute groupthink on this thing. I think there's still a number of different philosophies of thought, and I think it's something that we're going to have to get used to. And there's be some trial and error in here too, no question.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, when I say dust settling, I mean, I think the dust is settling in terms of the structure, right? The backbone of how the setup is settling. I think now in terms of everybody using the setup, honestly, I think it's going to probably take a full cycle. I think it's going to take 5 years. I think I think a lot of, guys in major junior already, I think their mindset's kind of set already. I think there's probably some guys probably aren't, even eligible for NCAA right now. I think it's going to take a full cycle to kind of, adjust the way of thinking and to, kind of see, I guess, the next generation of player come into this fresh. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that, on that aspect, I think there's a lot of, dust to be settled yet. And then I think the only thing I haven't really heard anything on is Division II NCAA. I haven't. Maybe there's been something that's come out, but I haven't seen anything on that.
Yeah, there's so little Division II left that it's not really
right.
It's something that you very rarely hear about Division II, period. So it's something that it's not shocking, and I'd imagine they'll just follow suit too. But again, for them,
I imagine so too.
Will have an impact. It'll be very limited. It'll be a very limited number of players because, the rank and file major junior player, do I see their mindset changing? I think elite hockey players all have the same dream and same mindset, basically, in the long run. They want to play in the NHL. But it'll just be now a little bit more of an open way of doing things than they had before. So, and there'll still be non-academic kids because, we don't have that pressure. We have to take all academic guys. There'll still be non-academic guys. They're just, and let's face facts again, all of us that know elite hockey players know there are a lot of guys that just aren't academic. And that's not going to change. But at the same time...
Yeah, and that's true with anything in life, right? Some people just aren't, academics just aren't their thing, hockey or not.
Sure. But I think we're going to see some guys, we'll see probably, and it's good. The thing is, the people that really are going to have to get a handle on this are less the players. It's going to be more the coaches, the general managers, and the agents are going to have to get a handle on how to do this. I think agents... I've talked to some agents. I think they're starting to get some ideas, but it's something that, again, will formulate over time. And, it's something that I think, again, there's going to be, I think the thing that's obvious to me, I think, is what you've just gotten is for it's gotten kids the opportunity to take more than one route, obviously, towards NHL hockey. And it basically has gotten teams an ability to have a few more years of free development for some guys that they didn't have before. So it doesn't compromise major junior anymore. It doesn't compromise anybody anymore. It's just a matter that it's going to be, in a way, it's something that I sort of advocated a long time ago back in the 80s of if we could find some way for some 20-year-olds that don't have college eligibility anymore to develop at a high level. If there's some way to do that without throwing them into professional hockey, and putting them in maybe a little bit prematurely, it sort of is doing that. And in a way, I also say back in time we're going, sort of back to the 50s, because the 1950s, remember, most people don't realize it unless you really study a little bit of hockey history. Is back in the 1950s, this is the way it was. There was nothing against major junior players. There's no rule against it. There are guys that played for the Toronto Marlboros, the OHA, the #1 farm team of the Maple Leafs, that went on to play U.S. college. Red Berenson, one of the great names in U.S. college, played for the Regina Pats, who were the Montreal Canadiens' #1 farm team. And, of course, to educate people again, back in the 1950s, they talk about junior farm teams. NHL teams, in fact, did have junior farm teams. They had this thing called sponsorship. They signed you to what was called a C form back then, which is pretty much a letter of intent of turning pro with that team. It tied you to that team. And you'd play for their junior team and work your way up through the system. If you're a Montreal junior Canadian and you signed that C form, you were a future Montreal Canadian pro.
Okay.
When you turned pro, you'd be the Montreal Canadiens. And so they had this vested interest in junior hockey. And back in those days, if you played that hockey, that's a lot of U.S. college players did play junior hockey, and of course there was controversy back then about too many Canadian players, too few American players. It was mostly out in Minnesota in those days, because believe it or not, hockey in New England even was not what hockey in New England is today, or Detroit. Neither was what youth hockey is today. Back in those days, the Minnesota issue is very interesting stuff if you ever want to read up on it and look at it. But so in a way, we're just going way back to what it was 70 years ago. Close.
Yeah, history just repeats itself, right? Like anything in life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time for the Season Pass Point Unlock code for Episode 1. The Episode 1 Point Unlock code is PERFORM. Enter the code at www.swanhockey.io to receive your points. Season Pass is free to join. To join or to learn more, visit Swan Hockey Digital at www.swanhockey.io. And now, back to the show.
And Red Berenson said, "Look, I'm going to pursue an education." Back then, and he didn't turn pro with the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens weren't happy with him going to college hockey at that point. But that was then. This is now. Today, they have a different view of college hockey. Today, an NHL team would say, fine, we don't think you're quite ready to play at this level. Go play college a few years. And then we'll turn you pro. You're developing on their pay. You're developing over there. And it puts teams in a scenario now where they don't necessarily have to hurry that 20-year-old and necessarily put them in the ECHL, or necessarily have to say, no, son, you're done. They now can say, okay, now you have a few more years development. And maybe after 2 or 3 more years of development, you're ready to step right into the AHL or the NHL.
Right. So this is going to benefit. Yeah, like this will benefit the product of the NHL. Like at the end of the day, they're going to be getting, I guess, a better percentage of the best players available. Like there's less opportunity for guys to fizzle out because of certain paths that they chose to take or not take. So like it should make the NHL stronger. Again, maybe not this year, but 5-10 years from now, it's going to be very, very interesting. The other thing that I'm very interested to see is the average ages of the junior leagues now. So I was talking to, one major junior team. I don't think it was you, but they were telling me that it's all about the free agents right now, that they're going after, those high-end 19-year-olds, and that, now that those guys are available and they're able to, recruit those guys out of the USHL or the BCHL or wherever, like they're going after those guys. And now their draft picks that maybe would have, their draft picks are probably a year or two behind now. Because now that they can go after those guys, they'll probably, some of those draft picks now, those young guys aren't going to make the team anymore. So, and, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I could see that very well happening. And I've also heard that the North American Hockey League is, the thought process is start to go younger, which would make sense that if they're going to start to lose older guys to maybe some major junior, but maybe some USHL, if the USHL is losing guys to major junior, it makes sense that the North American Hockey League would start to go younger. It definitely makes sense for the NCDC to go younger. I mean, they're relatively young as it is. Haven't really heard much out of the NCDC if they're planning on going younger or not. But what do you think of all that?
Well, I think in major juniors, it could be a short-term effect because we have so many players we passed on simply because they weren't coming because of eligibility, that they're out there now. A lot of those players now will come originally. So it could be a short-term effect, although in the old days, again, to flash back, A guy like Larry Robinson, interesting story, Norris Trophy winner, didn't play major junior till he was very old. He played about 1 year of major junior. So he's a guy that came up late. So will it become a little bit more that we do have more older guys, or is it a short-term effect thing that we're getting guys now that would have originally come to us probably, but didn't because of eligibility issue? And that'll be an interesting question I'll be answering in the next few years. It may even be a mixture of both. As far as the American junior leagues go, I've heard the same thing, and there's a bit of logic to it. However, it always comes back to number one fan, the guy that owns the team. If number one fan is pushing to win and says, I want to win more than anything, you may see that not have the impact that, in theory, the league may say it, but in the end, the coaches remember the mercy of the owner. And if the owner says, I want to win now, if you want to keep your job, you're going to win now, which may mean going with older guys. So there has to be a major cultural change, or also has to be an enforced rule. And I know there are teams in the NCDC that are dead set against, putting any age limit or any real, stop on 20-year-olds. And I know there are, and for example, the whole Western Division.
But what are they capped? They're capped now, right? What are they capped at? Is it 9?
We'll see what it is next year.
What was it? What was it this past year? They were capped this past year, right? It was 2
goalies you're allowed. As I recall, it was 8 and 2 goalies you're allowed.
8 and 2. Okay.
8 and unlimited goalies. Yeah, 3 goalies would be 3. So goalies the rule didn't apply to, as I recall. But next year, what it'll be, I know there's been talk about 12. There's been talk about more, and I think in the end, of this year, they might have had some special thing because NCDC always has rule things are going on, and they constantly are evolving. So I'm not sure, what it'll be this year. There, one point I know the word 12 was thrown around, and the word unlimited has been thrown around, and so do I necessarily see them following age rule? Is a good question because the Western Division I know likes the old guys, and I know that there are teams out east here that love to win and like the old guys. So you're going to have to come down to the vote and who has the most votes. And, so you have the developmental side, the other side, the win now side. And
right.
And of course, the West is draw crowds they want to do. So, so they try to put something together that is not as much necessarily development, but it's entertainment because they draw crowds out there. So, it's not necessarily like you're going to have a uniform point of view in the league. And I think that the problem is even in the null, there are some guys that are very big development guys. There's no question. I know a lot of guys are very progressive development guys. Other guys I know are win now guys, and they'll say, hey, or they'll talk about development, but then when it comes to the season, and hey, they have a bad start, note how many 20-year-olds are playing suddenly. It's one of those things. So it's going to be one of the most interesting things to see how it evolves, and it could go either way. It depends on who you talk to, and it depends on how, and I wouldn't say necessarily how sincere they're being, but how long the truth of today lasts into tomorrow, because it's funny in hockey. I just talked about this about a free agency issue, about how what's honest today, the truthful opinion today, is not necessarily going to be the truth tomorrow. It changes.
Yeah,
in 24 hours.
Yeah, and the thing too, like my feeling on it from hearing everybody talk about it, I really don't even think it has anything to do with the players' well-being. Like I don't think they're saying, hey, we're going to go younger because we want to develop these guys for major junior. I think they're doing what they think gives them the best chance to survive. And when I say survive, I don't think some of these leagues are going anywhere. Like but I think that they're thinking like, okay, if we're going to get, rated for our older guys, maybe we should go with younger guys. There's going to be less of a chance of us getting rated, right? I think they're thinking of it in that aspect, not necessarily in the aspect of, oh, let's take a young guy and develop him and get him ready for major junior. I think they're doing what they feel is going to give them the best chance to kind of just keep their show moving forward with the least amount of interference as possible. And with that said, I think that every team is in a different situation, right? Like certain organizations are more sought after to play, for than others. So I think every team, how they handle this is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be kind of on a sliding scale based on the general player population's, wanting and determination to play for that specific organization.
Well, you got to tell it like it is. Let's be honest. The leagues may talk about that, but to the owner, it's about making money. And to coach, it's about keeping my job and maybe advancing. So
right, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like they're if they go younger, it's not necessarily because they want to promote younger kids to major junior. It's that they feel like, hey, we need to go younger to give ourselves the best chance at, success or whatnot, and just keep this show marching forward. Like, that's my feeling on it.
Well, that's one way, or else maintaining pertinence. Because remember, those winning organizations probably won't be the organizations that go young. The ones that are sought-after organizations kids want to play for. Why do they want to play there? Because they win. Why do they win? Because they use old guys and have a veteran team.
Yeah, there's truth to that.
And so they're not going to. The thing is, some teams that are doing it, or teams are almost shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, we can't win at that game. Maybe you can win at this game. And maybe we'll attract players. Now, in terms of recruiting, what they might end up doing is, if you get a good track record of promoting guys, you sort of point to that team and say, yeah, they won a championship, but how many guys did they promote? How many guys ended up going to higher league or ended up in Division I? We did that. So maybe you want to come to us instead of them. Now, whether that'll be a game changer in the balance of the league, that's another good question. You'll get some talented young kids, but can the talented young kids beat necessarily the big, heavy 20-year-old team?
It's tough. It's a lot tougher than most. It's a lot tougher than most people think. Yeah, it's a lot tougher than most people think.
It is. It's a difficult equation.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta tell you what. If I had an NA team, I would be so tempted to just go 20-year-olds across the board and just recruit a new team every year. Like, I would look to pull 20 Americans out of Hockey Canada and just roll. Like, I think the team would do very, very well because I think that there's a lot to be said for having an older team.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Swan Hockey Podcast. We remind you that season pass points are available to listeners. For more information, please visit www.swanhockey.io. Until next time.